It's wintertime. That means we are feeding cattle in the snow, in the ice, when it's cold with hay. So, where do we go to feed those animals? That's today's topic of In the Chute. When you're feeding in the wintertime, where do you feed them? Obviously, it's the pasture, but why don't I knew where you were going. Don't start there. Why like what helps you decide where you're gonna feed, what you want to sequence? Because you don't just feed on the exact same spot every single day. So what
Right.
leads you to the decisions to bring out the bales to certain spots in the pasture every year?
Um, the most accessible, flattest part, obviously.
Sure.
And then I like to feed into the wind so that you're not laying that feed out crosswise of the wind so the wind can blow up. We live in windy country. That's just
Yeah.
something we deal with, especially in the wintertime. But our winter pasture, I try to rotate. Um, well, we feed every day and then feed right next to the line of where we took our feed from the day before. I'll extend a line out. I might go 3 to 4 days in that section where we've got the bale strung out, and then the next fourth or fifth day, I'll go back and I will feed downwind slightly from where we were before. And so that when they're feeding, of course, they're pooping all over everything. And what happens is as they feed all of that gray grass and alfalfa up throughout the winter, we're also fertilizing that ground and it's knocking seeds off of it. So it's really kind of a mechanism to where we're doing some rest rotation on the feeding ground, and then you'll fill up whatever it is that year, depending on how much you've fed out, how long you've fed out, depending on whether they had any winter feed or not. Um, and you kind of lay those lines of feed out so that you're really covering a specific area, a kind of a block area of that pasture. And then in the winter or in the spring, then we try to harrow that in before the rains come or as the rains coming, and break up all of the any leftover hay, that was not picked through, all of the manure, break it all up, kind of stimulate those grass rhizomes, and then hope that rain comes and really helps to increase our grass density as well as our variety, and spread it out a little bit more, and then use some of that year. By that time, it's you're half a year old cow manure to kind of blend that in for some fertilizer. And then you just rotate that. The next year you pick another portion of the pasture. The next year you do the same thing, and we can generally get about a 3 to 4 year rotation on that ground. Sometimes 5 years, depending on if we've had good years and you're not feeding super heavy, or an open winter where they've got feed that they would prefer to graze a lot of times too. I mean, they love that feed, don't get me wrong. They'll come right to it. But then after they've had a fill of that, they want to go back out and they'll graze. So just depends on those weather conditions. But it's really, we actually do a rest rotation on our feeding ground where we feed, so that we can not pound that ground into, where they're really tearing it up, because a cow can tear ground up, especially when you get a, 100 or so head that you're feeding. That can be hard on the ground. So you want to spread that out, stretch it out, and then try to do a little bit of, I call it repair by harrow in the springtime.
Some people might see that the feed area is pretty far from the house. You have to actually go pretty pretty ways down the
About a mile.
yeah, down the pasture,
That's
fence line
nothing.
and into.
Yeah.
Is there ever a concern with trying to drive a vehicle out there to get to those locations?
Oh, so. Yes. He's asking the question that somebody else would probably ask and wonder how. Yeah, when that snow gets deep enough sometimes and the wind blows and you got drifts, you can't get through it. The best way to get through snow in our country most of the time is to have some weight on the back of a pickup. And if you put a 1,200-pound bale on the back and chain that thing up, you can actually get so far that you'll get yourself stuck and then you can't get out. That's kind of a bad deal. But that weight on the back of that pickup really helps to have momentum and traction. Really, it's the traction issue to get and bust through drifts. But we've also got a big green tractor, and we got a blade on the front of it that articulates. We can V plow it. We can throw snow from one side or the other, just articulate it from one side to the other, left or right. And so, yeah, there's been times when I've had to be in that tractor and literally plowing a snow plows like width out so that your mom can follow me in the pickup, and then I'll just so those cows have a place to eat when the snow's deep enough. Then I'll plow out where we're going to feed, and then feed right behind that. And you do that on the upwind side so that you can just keep rolling that snow downwind if it doesn't get blown clear, so that you can continue to have a snow plate or a snow field open so that those cows can eat the next and subsequent days after that. So that happens. It's not fun, but at least we can get those cows fed. They're not standing, in snow that's up to their bellies and trying to eat something and having that snow blow all over the top of the crusted drifts and blowing out of the pasture. It'll kind of hold it down in below the snow line.
In the times before you had that articulating blade for the tractor,
Hmm.
what what were the solutions at that time?
Just a bucket on the front of that tractor.
Yeah.
And the old tractor, which was not a four-wheel drive or two-wheel, the front end assist. You call it four-wheel drive, but it's really a front end assist on this tractor. But we had just a regular tractor that was I think it was a 4230, and it was less than stellar in snow. So what we would do is we would chain that guy up, which was not fun to chain it. You and your brother and I spent a couple hours in the, when we had to do it in the shop,
Lots of
putting
bungee
chains on it.
cords.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And tying those things on and getting them tight. And then once we put them on, they stayed on. And you could generally get through the winter by, using that bucket on the front, and you're just pushing snow. You're not really doing anything. It's kind of like a plow, but it's only an 8 foot wide bucket, so you didn't get much. But at least it was something that you could clear a little bit of a path, and that was the way it was done. And that is high tech compared to what we used to have when I was a kid. You know,
Yeah. The last thing I got is every once in a while you'll see, I think it happened once or twice last year, a string of hay bales laid out just beyond the fence going into the pasture and over by the old cottonwood trees. And you actually went against the wind. You had the line going north to south so the wind could hit the whole thing. What made you choose to feed there for the few times that you did?
yeah, it was about being able to get out because we didn't have that pickup available, and it was
Goes
just
back.
doing it close.
Yeah.
Trying to get that whole hydro bed put on that pickup. We had to have it, and thought it was going to be done in about 4 days or a week. I figured, it's going to be twice that. No, it turned out to be about 3 weeks, and that was not fun. So, and I will feed against the wind or crosswise to the wind on that one section because it's convenient, and uh, we can get it, and hopefully you do that where you're taking a chance to lose a bunch of hay or it just tumbles downwind a little bit. But it does cover it, at that point. Those cows they'll chase it a little bit, but it's about more of trying to make a better pasture with some more grass and fertilizing it while we're having a place to feed. And then it's less than optimal. I would rather not feed that way, but it beats driving out a mile and traveling just several hundred yards to feed the cows out instead of just doing a line one after the other throughout
Right.
really, and it's about a 4 or 5 day rotation on that direction. So sometimes these bales, those alfalfa bales, they hold together a lot better than the grass bales. So you can get away with it with those alfalfa bales a
Right.
lot easier.
Well, that is feed locations in the pasture during the winter time. So with that, we'll take that conversation and put it out to pasture.